Good morning or good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Anna Beko, and I would like to welcome you to the Grow, Learn, Connect webinar series. This session is being recorded, and we will share the recording with you after the webinar. So while we're waiting for other participants to connect, I would like to remind you of some of our ground rules. So rule number 1, please participate. This session is for you. So the more you actively engage, the more all of us will learn. But please be respectful. We will keep your microphones muted all the time. And if you have a question, please type in your question in chat. We will respond to all your questions at the end of the webinar. And if we start running out of time and can't address your questions today, we will make sure to respond in writing in our follow-up email. We also recommend that you turn off your cameras just to save bandwidth. And since this is our very first webinar in the series, let me tell you a little bit about the goals and format of the GLC webinars. We have launched this initiative with the goal to share best practices and knowledge within the GLC training community and beyond, and also to support learning and performance professionals such as yourselves as you are looking for resources to elevate your skills and standards of training delivery. The GLC webinar series will be conducted on a monthly basis every third Thursday of the month, unless specified otherwise. At this time, I would also like to thank our partners and master trainers who have enthusiastically joined us in this initiative. Every month, they will be sharing with us their knowledge and tips, so please stay tuned for further announcements. But if there is any burning topic that you would like GLC to cover in the future, please do let us know. After the webinar, we will send you the link to a short survey. Please take this opportunity to nominate a topic of interest to you. And now, it is my pleasure to present you our first speaker, Hadiga Hassan Fahmy. Hadiga is a Senior Operations Officer at IFC. She has over 16 years of experience in the SME development sector. She works with IFC's Financial Institutions Group Advisory and leads the non-financial services workstream. Hadiga, over to you.
So the platform hosts IFC's Principles for Learning, which represents the foundations for making training programs impactful, inclusive, scalable, and sustainable. It also hosts IFC's Guide to Training, which puts the principles into action by providing steps and guidance for each phase of a training or performance improvement program. The guide comes with 2 supplements, which focus on considerations for gender inclusion and operating in fragile and conflict-affected situations. You can find the guide on the GLC platform, and you can download it, as well as the supplements. The platform also provides several courses to enable you to further enhance your skills in the area of performance and learning. Some courses are self-study, and others are blended. Some of these courses include foundational courses, again, which you will find on the GLC platform. They cover topics such as the training life cycle, maximizing learning, and ethics for performance and learning professionals. These foundational courses are a prerequisite actually to all learning experiences and courses offered by the Grow, Learn, Connect program, and are available both in English and French. We also have the course Facilitating Face-to-Face Learning. We call it the FFF course. This course examines how to make in-person training more interactive, engaging, and effective. It also offers you the possibility to take an assessment to become an IFC LPI certified trainer. So at the end of the course, you can go through an assessment and get a certification from the Learning and Performance Institute in the UK. We're also offering becoming a master trainer in facilitation program. This program is for select trainers who demonstrate outstanding facilitation skills and want to train others on how to effectively facilitate training. Successful completion of this program enables you to deliver actually the Facilitating Face-to-Face Learning course, the FFF. Participation, though, to this is by invitation only, so please stay tuned for announcements. We're also in the process of developing more training courses and programs to equip professionals with the skills required for effective online training delivery. These include courses such as from live in the classroom to live online, considerations for moving the classroom online, designing and developing learning. So please check back regularly to see what other courses and programs and webinars we have added, or join us again in next month's webinar. And we will update you on the new developments. The platform also offers a directory, which is open to the whole training community. If you have not registered in the directory, please do so. Once registered, you can connect with other training professionals, and clients will be able to find you as well. Note that we are registering only consultants and trainers with a proven record of training experience, so you will be asked to submit evidence of such experience. It could be a diploma, it could be a certificate, etc. But we want to make sure that whoever is in the directory has training experience. And now I would like to give the floor to our presenter, Karen Feely. Karen is an IFC Master Trainer, an IFC LPI TPMA Certified Trainer and Assessor, and an Instructional Designer, and a Certified Project Manager. She has over 25 years of experience in the training sector, having a wealth of experience in every stage of a training project lifecycle. She has designed and delivered training on almost every continent. Karen has advised Fortune 500 companies, government agencies, and multilateral organizations on workplace learning since 1996. In 2009, she founded Comprehensive Learning Solutions, a global corporate training consulting firm. She holds an MBA in Human Resource Management with an emphasis on training and development. Karen, over to you.
Thank you, Khadija. Hello, everybody, and welcome to engaging participants online. I'd like to, before we get started, introduce two more members of the team who are absolutely critical to the success of this webinar. And that is Mark Shellhays, who is from IFC's IT department, and he is making sure that this WebEx session works properly for us. And also with us today is Rania Nader. Rania is part of IFC's Grow, Learn, Connect network and is a learning and performance consultant. Among her many responsibilities is managing the GLC's Master Trainer Network. Today, she is going to be my co-host, and she is going to monitor the chats and look out for your questions and make sure that I see them. So you're going to hear her voice throughout this session. Okay, so if you are attending this session today, you've probably discovered that you are going to have to lead some kind of webinar pretty soon. Maybe you're facilitating a training session and you've never done it before, and so you're a little nervous about what to do. Or maybe you have led it before, but you realize you could do it a little better. Or maybe you're not leading a training session so much as you are facilitating or presenting on a webinar. And you just want to make sure that you look as professional as you can and engage your participants. Well, this webinar is for you. As you know, the COVID-19 pandemic is rapidly changing the way the business world operates. The longer physical distancing requirements and travel bans remain in place, the more that the world is going to change its habits. One of the things that has changed already is the use of web conferences, just like this one. And here's an interesting question for you to put this in perspective. What percentage more subscribers did Zoom have at March 30th, 2020 compared to December 31st, 2019? And to put that in perspective, March 30th is 2 weeks after most of the travel bans went into effect. So do you think that Zoom had 50% more subscribers, 100%, 150%, or 200% more subscribers? Go ahead and put your answer in the chat box. And again, if you don't remember where that is, roll it, or if you don't see it, roll over the bottom of your screen and look for the little button that looks like a speech bubble. So far, I see two people that seem to have the same answer. which is D, 200%. Anybody else want to chime in? Well, Jonica and Haggai, you are correct. The answer is actually D, 200%. Can you believe they went from 10 million to 200 million users in just 3 months? And I would bet that most of that came in the last 2 weeks. And one of the reasons that these type of webinars are becoming so popular is because, as you've probably seen, they're a pretty easy and fairly inexpensive substitute for face-to-face learning. And thanks to advances in the technology, we can see and hear each other in real time and even look at the same objects, all without leaving the comfort or the safety of our home. And we can do it with people all over the globe at the same time, just like in this webinar. So think of this webinar as giving you a helping hand to retool your skill set so that you can feel more comfortable when you are presenting online. I want to be clear, though, about what we mean by facilitating and what we mean by meetings. So when you think about the purposes for web meetings in a business setting, it usually comes down to one of these three. The first are working meetings. And working meetings usually happen with 2 to 10 people in a team. And the goal is either to make decisions, produce deliverables, or give status updates. In these type of meetings, the facilitator's role is pretty much the same as in working meetings. And that is to progress the agenda, to keep everybody talking and on time, and to reach decisions. The second type of meeting, or the second purpose for the meeting, are presentations. And here, the goal is really to inform the listeners. So interactivity can help keep your audience interested, but it's not critical to success. And when you start getting above 80 or so participants, that interactivity can get a little hard to manage. So in those type of meetings, it's probably better to leave the interactivity to a final question and answer session. The third type of meeting is the training session. And here, interactivity is critical to success because the goal of this type of a session is really to engage the participants so that they can start to change their knowledge, their behavior, or their attitudes. And in order to do that, they need to interact because, as the saying goes, you cannot learn for someone else. People have to work with the information and use their brain in order to feel comfortable. Well, this webinar today is really focused on this third type of meeting. But what you're going to hear is going to be applicable to the other two types. So how are we going to do this? Well, we're going to answer 4 of the most commonly asked questions that new online facilitators have. And they are, how can I get people to engage more? And we're going to show you some of the most common tools available on any type of webinar software and give you some ideas for how to use it. The second question is, how can I hold participants' attention? And we'll talk about other things you can do beyond activities to adjust your facilitation style for online delivery. Thirdly is the question, how do I adapt in-person materials for online? And here, we're not going to get into a big discussion about instructional design, but we will give you some important tips in case you have to quickly move your class from the classroom to online. And finally, how can I look more professional when presenting? And in this case, we'll talk about everything you need to do before you actually start talking. So this will be about preparation. Now we're going to dive right in right now with a little activity to help familiarize everyone with the equipment. Because as Anna mentioned, this is going to be an interactive session. So in a moment, I'm going to ask you some questions about yourself, and I would like you to answer them. And the way you're going to answer is, if the answer is yes, I want you to click the green check button. You can find this green check button if you have either your participants or your chat window open, and you look at the bottom of that, you will see 3 little buttons. One looks like a hand, and if you click on the hand, that will raise it. If you click again, it will lower it. But next to the hand is a button that looks like a little megaphone, and it has a little arrow. If you click on that down arrow, it will bring up a list of what it calls feedback. And right at the top is the green check mark. That means yes. So if you click that, and you can try this right now, it will bring a green check mark up. So let's see if you can do that. Okay, so I see we've got people who have done that. Thank you. Rhonda, would you mind clearing off the feedback results? And we'll ask the first question. Okay, so raise your hand if you have ever facilitated an online training session before. Sorry, not raise your hand, use the green check mark. If you have ever facilitated an online training session before, meaning how we described it just a few moments ago as that third category. All right, so what I'm seeing at the moment is we've got about 14 people on here who actually have facilitated online training before. And that's wonderful, because I would like to think of you as my co-experts. And you are going to, I hope, give us some advice later on as we get on about what works for you. So thank you very much. Rania, would you mind clearing that off? Thank you. And we're going to try this again. If the answer is yes, remember to click the green check mark. Now the question is, raise your hand if you have ever facilitated or led any type of online meeting, whether it's a training or a presentation or just a working meeting. Click that check mark if the answer is yes. We're getting a lot more people, and I'm seeing some in the chats also saying yes. That's great. We're up to about 31 people, and it's expanding. So that's great. Fantastic. Got a couple more yeses, a couple more check marks. Great. Okay, let's clear that off one more time. And we're going to ask one more question. And again, if the answer is yes for you, click that green check mark, or at least write yes in the chat. And the question is, have you ever attended a webinar of any type in any role? Have you been a participant? Have you been a leader? Has it been a training or just a working meeting or even a presentation? Whatever the answer is, if it's yes, go ahead and either click the green check mark or write yes in the chat. We've got a couple, oh, we're getting a lot more on this one. I got a yes for sure from Carlos Gil. And yeah, we're getting a lot more. Yeah, we're up to about at least a third of you have responded to that. And you may be able to even see the green check marks too. Great. Well, thank you, Rania. Well, see how easy that was to participate? That's one way to bring people in. And the other good news about this is that since so many of you have had experience, you You can use that experience when you are facilitating to make your sessions even better. Just think about what you like in other people's sessions and do that. And think about what didn't work in the sessions you attended and don't do that. Well, let's begin now with the big question on most people's minds, which is, how can I get people to engage more? Well, there are a lot of options, but the most important thing to remember is that it all begins with you. As it says here at the bottom of the slide, you have to model the behavior you want. So if you do not encourage participation, you're not going to get it. And if you come across as just wanting people to listen to what you say, that's exactly what they're going to do. They're going to listen, but their eyes are going to be somewhere else, and so will part of their brain. Even though we've only just completed the introductions to this webinar, we have already done a number of things to encourage participation. So I'd like you to think about that for a moment, and in the chat, see if you can recall what have we done already to encourage your participation. Go ahead and write your answer in the chat box. Getting feedback, Rajiva says, yes, just like we did right now when I asked you to hit the green box, the green check mark. Using emoticons, Matthew says. I asked you questions, says Eileen and Catherine. Absolutely. Taking people through the toolbars that they will use for participation, says Catherine also. And that's a really good point. Make it easy for them to use it. Absolutely. So that's one thing that you can do. Another thing that you can do to encourage participation is to smile when you talk. Even if you don't have the camera on, keep on smiling, because when you smile, you sound happier and friendlier and more energized. And interestingly enough, they've done studies and they found that listeners can tell the difference between the smiling voice and the non-smiling voice, even when they can't see it. So keep smiling to sound happy. And thirdly, conduct some type of icebreaker activity. Even if it's just a quick 5-minute icebreaker, this will help people to feel more comfortable and will start to set the expectation that participation is requested. You see, icebreakers serve several important purposes during training. The first one is that they encourage participation. Most people feel a little uncomfortable at the beginning of a training speaking up. And so when you do an icebreaker, it encourages them that, okay, this isn't going to be so bad. And especially if you start with an easy question so that they know this won't be too difficult, it makes them feel more comfortable. The second thing that an icebreaker does is it provides an instant audience assessment. You know, no matter how much research you do before your class, you just never know who's going to be in the room until they're there. So you can do an audience assessment by asking a question about your audience and finding out how much experience do they have. And then you can use that to tailor your response and your conversation. Thirdly, icebreakers help focus attention on the topic. When I teach a Train the Trainer course for face-to-face training, I always tell my participants that remember that the people coming into the class, they are not ready to hear what you have to say when they arrive. Because when they arrive, they're thinking, where did I park the car? Boy, that traffic was terrible. They're thinking about everything else they have to do. So you need to focus their attention. And when you're doing this on an online webinar, it's even more important because nowadays people are going from back-to-back meeting on the web, and they don't even have the luxury of the 3 minutes it used to take them to walk down the hall to the next conference room to clear their head. So when they come in, they're still thinking about the last meeting. So when you ask an icebreaker question, it helps to focus their attention. And for online, icebreakers serve a fourth purpose, and that is to familiarize participants with the tools. So if you know you are going to use a particular tool, like that check button, then it's a good idea to teach people how to use it during the icebreaker. That way, you don't have to really interrupt your train of thought when you're in the heart of the content to explain how to navigate the equipment. And the reverse is also true. If you are not going to use a particular functionality, do not use it for the icebreaker. There's no point in teaching them something that they're not going to use. Now, some of you, such as Rasika, might be asking, well, do you have any ideas or any suggestions for what we can do as icebreakers? And thank you, Rasika. That's a wonderful lead into my next slide, which is that there are a lot of options. And here you see 3 sites that have some really good ideas for activities that you can do for online icebreakers. And the good news for you today is you do not need to take a screenshot of this slide, and you do not need to furiously write down all of these long URLs, because right now, Rania is going to put a summary of this webinar in the chat box, a link to it. And if you click on that link, you can download that summary sheet that has these websites listed. If you forget where this is or you don't get to download it quickly, you can always go to the GLC website invitation for this webinar, and the links are there too. And Rania is going to put that link in right now. And also, after this session, we will be sending you a copy of that summary with these links. So if you don't get it here, you will get it there. And if you don't like what's on those sites, you can always Google virtual icebreakers for adult training. And there are a lot of ideas out there. I do recommend when you do the Google search that you use the word adult training. Otherwise, you get lots of ideas for school-age children. Whatever activity you pick, please remember to keep it simple and quick. Usually just 1 or 2 questions is sufficient. And make sure that the question is relevant to the training you're going to give. Remember, you're trying to help focus the attention. And consider giving parameters around the answers. So you might say, in the chat, give me 1 word that describes how you're feeling. Or give me 1 short sentence that tells me what you're concerned with, or whatever it is. As you can see now, icebreakers set the tone for the level of engagement. But let's now think about what you can do to keep that level of engagement going after the icebreaker. And we'll start with the most obvious tool, and that is the microphone. Now, since so many of you have been on webinars before, you probably have an idea of how the microphone works. So rather than me telling you about the benefits, I would like you to tell me. So what do you think are some of the benefits of asking participants to talk using the microphone during a webinar? Go ahead and write your answer in the chat box. So what are some of the benefits? Lola says it can help get their attention. Yeah, it can bring them back if they had started to drift off. Now they're like, oh, I have to write something. Great answer. Han says it keeps them more engaged. A couple of people are saying that too, to make sure the participants are following you. Yeah, you can ask questions of all varieties and get them to talk with you. It's active, so they're using their brain. Absolutely. The question again was, what are some of the benefits of using the microphone to have participants talk during a webinar? Philippe says that it makes them part of the webinar, so they're active, and that's exactly it. You've all hit upon it. The benefit of it is that it keeps them active, and it also allows for more in-depth discussion and detailed comments. So you can use this, like if somebody writes an answer and you don't understand quite what that answer means, you can do just like you do in the classroom and say, let me unmute you, and can you tell me a little bit more about what you mean? Now, the challenge with microphones is that, for one thing, when they're open, you hear all kinds of background noise. So it's always a good practice to have everybody mute their microphones when they are not speaking. The other challenge that you have with microphones, especially if they're open, is that people can start to accidentally talk on top of one another. And so you get the situation where you have, well, I think, oh, well, oh, well, oh, you go, no, you go, right? And you have that whole situation happening. So it's a good idea to, as I said, mute everybody and just unmute the speaker. And that actually stops that issue. One thing you should be aware of is that the microphone icon looks different depending which software, which web software you're using, and the placement is slightly different. So I recommend before you start your webinar that you actually look at where is the microphone icon and how do you mute and unmute it. And also look at this from multiple perspectives, because how your screen looks as the presenter is a little bit different than how your screen looks if you are the participant. And so the buttons can move to different places. So what I recommend is log on to the webinar software as the presenter, and then from another computer or another device, log on again as a participant and look at the differences between the screens. Also keep in mind that the screen will look different and the microphone placement will be different depending on whether you are joining from a computer, from a tablet, or from a mobile phone. So check it out on all three so that you know how to direct people if they can't find the information or they can't find the button.
And
So,
Karen,
yes, Rania.
hi. So speaking about microphones, I just would like to remind everyone that although you're on mute, you can always write your questions in the chat, and we will have a few minutes at the end to answer your questions. Some of you will have already started doing that, so please go ahead and continue writing your questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Rania. Another thing about the microphones, if you are the host or you can sometimes, depending on the software, mute everybody else. And this is a really nice function because sometimes somebody forgets to turn off their microphone. And so you hear all the background noise and the conversation. And so if you know you can mute somebody, you don't have to be the person who says, hey, somebody's got their mic on, can you please turn it off? You don't have to be that person. You just go in and you find that person and you mute them. Some software even lets you mute everybody except for the speaker, and you can mute them all at once. And I love that because you don't even have to search. You just turn it off. It's also a great way to eliminate side conversations. And here's one way that I think webinars are better than face-to-face. Because you know how in face-to-face you always have those two people who are sitting there talking amongst themselves and everybody else hears is, but you can't make out the words, but it's just loud enough to be distracting. Well, on the webinar, you can mute those people, so that can't happen. I really wish I could do that in classrooms sometimes. When you are training, though, it's best to use the microphones for the participants sparingly. There's an easier way to control the flow of conversation, and that is, as Rania mentioned, by using the chat function. And so many of you have already done this here or elsewhere. So once again, I would like you to tell me, what are the benefits of asking participants to use the chat function? So go ahead and write your answer in the chat box. So the question is, what are some of the benefits of asking participants to use the chat function? Rudolph says it helps them to focus on the important points. Yeah, you can ask them questions. What do you think is the most important thing you just learned? Jonica says they can present the question in their own way. Yeah, so if they don't quite understand, they can write it in. You can have a track, Najud says, of what's been said. Yeah, it gives you a written record. And in some places, you can even save the chat function, and that becomes something for the future. Adam says it allows shy people to talk. They don't want to say it out loud, but they're okay with writing it. Allows people to chat one-to-one or one-to-all. That's right. So you can have sometimes side conversations. It gives people the chance to talk without interruption. These are all great benefits. You are absolutely right. And you basically hit it. They can respond without having to speak out loud. And you can use questions in a lot of different ways. Like you said, you can use it to see if they understand, to see if they're following you, to bring them back onto their screen. But you should realize that when you ask questions, especially short answer questions, using the chat, it takes a little bit longer to get an answer than it would in the classroom. And that's because of the way that we think and the way we respond. So in the classroom, if I ask you a question, you think, and then you open your mouth and you speak. But online, you think of the answer, then you have to grab your mouse. You got to potentially flip back over to the webinar if you kind of drifted off. Find that chat box, type your answer, hit enter. It has to come across the internet. I have to read it. So all of those happen in a matter of seconds, but those seconds can add up. And as many of you know who have facilitated before, when you are talking, that silence can feel like forever. So many people who are not comfortable with the silence often ask a question and then answer it too quickly. So they'll say, so what color is the sun? Well, I'll tell you, it's yellow. And they don't give people a chance to think. When I teach the face-to-face version of this Train the Trainer class, I always tell people, after you ask a question, count to 10 in your head. Usually about by 5 or 6, somebody will start to answer. And that gives them time to think. So for online, you need to make it just a little bit longer. So I suggest counting to 15. And usually by about 7 or 8, somebody will start to respond. Now, when they start to respond, it's a good idea to read the responses out loud and say who said it, just like you heard me doing earlier. That does a couple of things. Number one, it acknowledges their effort and it validates their answer. It also gives other people a chance to write and to realize, yeah, you really do want an answer. So then they start to write. Well, then what happens is after a while, the answers start coming so quickly that you can't even read all of them. They're just scrolling up on the chat box so quickly. Well, don't worry, you don't have to read them all. Just read about 3 or 4 and then move on. Now, for simple closed-ended questions, most web conferencing software has an even quicker tool that you can use, and that is the response emoticon. And again, depending on your software, it may look like a green check mark, it may look like a hand, it may look like a smiley face. There may be check marks and X marks. So you have to check that out on your software. But you can use this to get feedback from participants instead of the nods that you would have in the classroom. So you can ask them, does this make sense to you? If you're still with me, click the green check mark. And you can ask them, if you have a question, click the raise hand icon so I can answer it. You can also use this for quick polls. So you could say, like, how many of your businesses have a website? Raise your hand if you have a website. And then the nice thing is for you can see how many hands go up. Depending on the software, your participants might also be able to see the hands go up. And that's really nice because it gives them a visual, something else to look at and go, oh, wow, look at that, I'm not alone. You could also ask the question by saying, does your business have a website? If the answer is yes, click the green check. If the answer is no, click the red X. So it's a nice, easy way to do this. So let's try this right now. Using that feedback icon, that green check mark that we used before, check yes, the green mark, if you have ever used response emoticons in training sessions that you have facilitated. So remember that check mark is under the megaphone button. That megaphone button is at the bottom of either your chat screen or your participant screen. So go ahead and check the green bar if you've ever used the green check bar if you've ever used it before. And we've got kind of a tie going here between the yeses and the nos. We're at 13 for each. So this is something new that you could use. By the way, I believe that in this software, if you want to see the feedback results, you can see it too. So if you go into that same list where you have the yes and no, you go all the way down to the bottom of that list, it says check feedback results. And I believe that even for the participants, you can see how much everybody is answering. And notice how quickly I worked in this little activity. I didn't even need to create a whole separate activity. You can just slide it in to keep people here. Well, so far, we've talked about how to use auditory techniques to keep people engaged, and mainly that's question and answers. But visuals can help too. You can use the screen sharing function, just like I'm doing here, to show your slides and to do demonstrations. Now, again, depending on the software, how you share your screen is going to work a little bit differently. Some allow you only to share your whole screen, and whatever is the active window is what shows. Others allow you to share an application. Others allow you to share just a particular file. So you have to know how your share works so that you know what to have up on your screen. If you are going to share your screen, remember to close out of all other applications that you do not want people to see. So close out of your email, close out of your calendar, close out of Facebook, because if by accident you share your screen, you are going to show them everything. And if you are going to share multiple screens, like let's say you have a PowerPoint up and then you want to click and show a YouTube video, remember that you need to share both applications. A lot of times that happens where we'll click on the link and we see the video and we're going like, oh, this is great. They're watching the video. And then you realize that only you can see it. Make sure to share that other application. Another basic tool for visual is to use the camera. And that allows you to really see people's reactions and for them to see your visual cues. But there's a couple of challenges with using the camera. First of all, if you have a big session like this and you want to see everybody, you're not going to. We have 159 people on this call. Even if you could see everybody, they would be so small it wouldn't really do you any good. Second of all, using the camera uses a lot of bandwidth. And so if you're in an area that has bad bandwidth connection, or if you know a lot of your participants don't have such good bandwidth connection, limiting the use of camera is acceptable. So I suspect that at this point in the 6 months of the pandemic, most people have used some kind of camera or screen sharing in a meeting that they've been on online. So rather than me telling you what are best things to do, I'd like to hear from you and share your experience. So right now, again, using the chat, I'd like you to share with us your favorite tip or your favorite lesson that you've learned about sharing screens or using cameras in a web meeting. So what is one thing that over the last 6 months you've gone, aha, this is what I need to do? Go ahead and write that in the chat. What is your favorite tip for either using the camera on web meetings or for using screen sharing? Rajiva writes that screen sharing is very important. Yeah, Philippe makes a really good point. He says that make sure you have an appropriate background. Yeah, and we're going to talk about that some more in a little while. Mehdi says he uses the camera more in webinars than in online training. And I do tend to agree with you. It's a little bit more difficult to have the camera on when you're doing online training, because if you want to look at your notes, it's a little bit trickier. Catherine says have good lighting so that your face can be seen. Absolutely. Try not to backlight yourself. Also, check the camera that you have on your webcam, on your computer. I recently bought a new computer rather, and discovered that my web camera is not high resolution. So, in that case, you have to figure out an alternative. Mariana says, check your camera angle. Yeah, whatever you do, don't shoot up. It'll give you those double chins that nobody wants. Better off having have the camera tilted down a little. It gives you a better angle. Yeah, I agree with GetNet, who says that the camera can be distracting. And I've had this happen where we've left the cameras on and then somebody decides to get up. They're watching it on their cell phone and they decide to get up and change rooms. And now, you're seeing the whole world go by and it's very dizzying. So those are some great tips. I really appreciate you sharing them. Well, if you're now thinking that monitoring the chat, clearing off the response emoticons, and doing all of that while making sure that everybody can hear, and while you're talking and trying to come up with the right answers is an awful lot to do by yourself. You are correct. It is. And that's why we recommend that you have a producer. In some web conferencing software, they call this a co-host. And the co-host or the producer is responsible for handling all of the technical aspects. So if there is a problem with audio or with somebody's connection, they can work with that person. They can mute or unmute participants. They can scan the chats for you. All of this stuff so that you can just focus on the content. Now, the good news is that your producer does not even need to be in the same room with you. As long as you're in the same web conference room, you're good to go. Just make sure you've given them co-hosting permission. So now that you know some of the easier options that exist for involving participants, let's address the next big question, which is, how can I hold participants' attention? The features that I've just mentioned can help you come up with activities to involve the participants. But even if you don't use activities, you can still help keep their interest by how you communicate. Back in 2018, Prezi, which is the software company that's a competitor to PowerPoint, and Kelton Global Consulting Firm conducted a study of what listeners in webinars find keeps them interested. And what do you think respondents said were the best ways to keep their attention? Now, I don't need you to write your responses, but I do want you to think about it for a moment. Well, according to this study, most people, 55%, said that a great story will help them to stay interested. Following behind that was stimulating dialogue and visual stimulation. And I should clarify that visual stimulation does not mean a pretty picture of a sunset. It means that what is happening on the slide and what is displaying on the slide changes frequently, and that the images reinforce what you are saying. So let's look at how you can build these into how you facilitate, starting with the top choice. Now, it does not surprise me that telling stories came in as number one, because storytelling is the oldest form of education. It goes back to even before the written language. When you tell a story, make sure your story is relevant to your discussion. Don't just tell one that is funny or interesting. Consider using case studies, because those are great ways to make the content relatable to the people and to what you are discussing. When you tell a story, you have two choices in how you do it. You can tell a story from beginning to end. And when you do it this way, you create what's called a knowledge gap or a curiosity gap. And this is that in the participant's mind, they now realize there's a gap in what they know. And so they become curious to stay to the end to hear the answer. So when you tell a story from beginning to end, that gap is, what is the result? So imagine that this is a course on customer service. I could tell you a story like this. A number of years ago, our bank was losing customers. We did a survey and discovered that even though our interest rate was higher than our competitors, people preferred to bank elsewhere because we had such poor customer service. To fix the solution, we conducted a survey, we did training, blah, 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 blah. Now we have the highest customer retention of all banks in the country. Our customer satisfaction ratings on bank review websites is a perfect 5. So when I tell it this way, the curiosity gap is, well, did you improve your customer service and how did you do it? Now, I will admit that the good side about telling a story this way is it's very easy to follow. The bad side is it's a little bit boring. So you can also switch it up and tell a story from the end to the beginning. And here the curiosity gap becomes, well, how did this happen? So for that same course on customer service, I could also have told the story this way. Our bank is renowned for its customer service. You have probably heard that we are the only bank that routinely gets perfect 5 scores for customer satisfaction ratings on bank review websites. This was not always the case. What do you think we did to turn around our scores? And then I could take a few guesses from the audience before telling them all the information and use that to springboard into the discussion. I called this method of storytelling the murder mystery approach, because it's kind of murder mystery that you've ever read or watched, right? If you think about it, those stories, they don't begin, here is the killer, here is the victim, here's why the killer hates the victim, here's how the killer kills the victim. That's a boring story. Instead, they all begin with a dead body. And that knowledge gap is who done it and why. And you stay with the story all the way to the end because you want to see if you were right in your guess. Now notice when I told this backward storytelling that I asked a question in there. I asked, what do you think we did? Remember that the second most common response to what keeps participants interested is stimulating dialogue. And questions are a great way to stimulate dialogue. So are trivia questions and statistics. You can ask a trivia question related to the topic right before you get into that discussion for almost every topic, and you will most likely keep everybody's attention. Statistics add credibility and can help you to emphasize a point. And if you want to make it a little bit more of a dialogue, turn that statistic into a question. Now, in my case, at the beginning of this session, of this part, I asked you what were the 3 top ways to keep participants interested. And then I pretty much gave you the answer right away. I also could have done it differently. I could have said, what are the top 3? Write your answer in the chat. And then I could have given you all this background information and at the end said, so according to the survey, here's what the answers were. I could have even made it even more interactive by going through all of, asking you, then saying, well, I'll tell you the answer in a few minutes, but here's some information, give the information, and then say, well, now that you've heard that, does anybody want to change their answer? And let them change it, and then give them the answer. And now they'll stick with you because they are curious to see whether they are right or not. Well, if you cannot find a good story to tell throughout your presentation, try using some sort of list to help organize the content. In essence, the list becomes your story. Lists are like mileposts along the route of information. They let the participants know how much ground you have already covered and how much more you have to go. For example, in this webinar, the list are the top 4 questions that facilitators often ask before they teach online. Doing a list makes it a little bit more interesting than just presenting dry facts. Beyond the course content, how you speak can impact participants' levels of interest. And here we're not talking so much about the words you choose, but rather how those words come out your mouth. Varying your tone, your pitch, and your speed is always important whenever you present, but it is even more critical when you are talking online because people, if your camera is off, they cannot see your body language. And even if your camera is on, they only have limited access to your body language. So here are some tips to help you with your vocal quality. First and foremost, stand when you talk. When you sit, you compress the diaphragm. The diaphragm is the muscle between your lungs and your stomach, and it's where you take in the air for speaking. When you stand, you have the full range of motion of that muscle, and it makes it easier to control the flow of air. Standing also helps you work out nervous energy. When you're standing, you can use hand motions to get out some of that energy. And unless you do it right up here near your mouth, pretty much nobody is going to see it. And here's another benefit of webinars over face-to-face classrooms. When you train or you present in a face-to-face classroom situation, we always tell you to stand still. Don't do this, right? Don't move from side to side, which a lot of people do because they're nervous. If you don't have your camera on, you can do that as much as you want and get out that nervous energy, and it'll make you sound more relaxed. If your camera's on, you can't do that quite so much. The second tip is to include pauses for impact. Most people speak at a rate of about 150 words per minute. But when you're listening and you're really trying to understand, you listen at about half that rate. So pausing after you state a key point can give your participants time to consider what you have said. A little longer pause can emphasize your point. Now you have to be careful not to overuse this technique, because if you do it too much, you're going to put yourself behind schedule. And also your audience is going to start to wonder whether you know what you want to say. So be a little careful. The third tip is to mirror your emotions with volume and speed. The speed and volume at which you talk can sometimes act as a substitute for facial expressions and body language when that is not available. So when you're talking about a shocking event, raise your voice. And if you're telling a very sad or emotional story, use a softer tone and a little quieter volume. If you want to sound excited, talk a little bit quicker. And if you want to sound bored, talk a little slower. So this last tip that I'm about to tell you is probably my favorite. And that is talk to a picture. For most of us, when we start presenting online for the first few times, it can feel really awkward. We are so used to having the reactions of people, the nods and the smiles to help make us feel more relaxed, like, okay, we're doing okay. And that nervousness, because we don't have that, because we're talking to a computer screen or to a wall, that can translate into monotone. So one thing you can do to help that is before the session begins, print out a picture of your favorite person and tape that picture of the person right above your camera lens. And then when you talk to that person, look at that picture. And because it's somebody you like, you're gonna smile more because you like that person. And then that'll make you sound happier and more relaxed. And the other thing too is because you're looking just a little bit above your camera lens, it'll still look like you're looking at the audience and not looking down at your notes. So let's move on now to the next big question, which is, how do I convert classroom material for online? And a lot of people think that all you need to do is take your slides and put them up on share screen and you're good to go. But the reality is that there are some differences between the two environments that require a little bit of adaptation. So first and foremost, keep it short. The absolute longest you should make any webinar is 2 hours. People just don't have the attention span for more than that. If you can make it shorter, that's even better. If you are using any form of interaction with your participants, recognize that it's going to take longer to do it online than it is in the classroom, especially if this is a one-time webinar and not part of a series where people get used to the web conferencing software. So we recommend assuming that you are going to have a 25% slower pace. What that means is if you know that you can cover all your content in 1 hour in the classroom, it's probably going to take you 1 hour and 15 minutes to do that online. Why? Because of what I said earlier, that people have to grab their mouse and click and type, and it's just a little bit slower. So think about trimming your content. Try to trim out about 25% so that you can fit in the time. So you may be wondering, well, what should I trim? Start by focusing on the 90%. Think about what is it that your participants need to know to do their job 90% of the time, and include only that. So leave out the exceptions, the things that happen only 10% of the time, because by the time they get to that, they're going to have forgotten it anyway. Try to go no more than 5 minutes between interactivity. And the reason for that is because people need to stay engaged. So we recommend 2 to 5 slides per minute. That helps them have something new to look at. This is way more than what you would do in a regular session. And if you don't want to have a big fat deck, you can use builds, just like I'm doing here. It's animation in PowerPoint. One slide, but it keeps changing. Finally, keep mobile in mind. Remember that not everybody is going to be joining from a computer. They might be joining from a tablet or from a cell phone, and so their screens might be smaller. That means use more image and less text, and make that text bigger so that it's easier to see. Finally, give a lot of thought to what you're going to say. The goal is to be as short, clear, and crisp as possible. This gets the message across better and helps you stay on time and on content. So now let's turn to what you can do to make life easier for yourself, and also to make yourself feel a little bit better and more professional. And we're going to talk here about preparation, and we'll give some special considerations for what to do during pandemics or other types of emergency situations. So the first thing you have to consider is, what is the purpose of your meeting? Remember the 3 meeting purposes at the beginning? Here they are. And across the top, we have some of the most well-known types of web conferencing software. So you have to ask yourself, first of all, what is the purpose of this meeting? This column, the web conferencing software here, has the most options for interactivity. And so it's good for anything. And the further you go to the right, the less functionality it has. So that when you get to live streaming, really it's very limited on its interactivity. Yes, there's a chat feature, but it's really, people use it just to say, yeah, this is great, keep it up, good work, I'm with you, right? They don't really use it to answer questions. So once you figure out what it is that's the appropriate software, then you have to organize the event. And we recommend sending invitations out 1 to 3 weeks ahead of time. Anything more than 3 weeks and people tend to forget about it. Anything less than a week and they're usually too booked up. The best practice now is to send the link, password, and dial-up number 1 hour to 1 day ahead of time, and that helps to prevent hackers. Also, think about whether you want to include read-ahead material. You may want to send the slide deck ahead of time if you know that your participants are going to have a hard time listening or watching your video, and that way they can follow along on their own. Some other things to consider are, do your participants have headsets? And do they need them? It might make it easier for them to hear or to block out or not disturb other people. Maybe you want to send that to them. And keep in mind, you don't have to send these fancy type of headsets here. You can use these type of mobile phone headsets so that, it's cheap and easy for them to use. consider how many people are going to be joining via mobile phone versus computer. If it's at the beginning of an emergency situation, they might not have their computers with them. Also, consider the best times for having the call. With everybody in shelter in place, the internet has gotten to be much more crowded. And so the peak meeting times of 10 to 3 are usually also the most crowded on the internet. So look for other times that might work. And by the way, if you are teaching this in an area where your participants are likely to be under a curfew, don't start your session within 2 hours of the beginning of the curfew, because they are likely trying to finish up their work, drive out of there, get their kids, get home, and they're not going to be interested in participating. So consider if maybe a after dinner call might work better. So these are some considerations that are for your participants, but let's talk about you. Remember, find yourself a producer who knows how to use the equipment, discuss ahead of time the roles and responsibilities with them, and do a dry run through so that they know what they're supposed to do. Also, have a blank piece of paper and a pen ready just in case you want to take notes. If you live in an emerging market area or in an emergency situation, there's 2 other big considerations. Number 1, what are you going to do if your internet goes out? Consider having a backup mobile hotspot, or at least know how to use the mobile hotspot on your telephone. Also consider, what are you going to do if your power goes out? If you live in an area with intermittent electricity, make sure you have a backup generator, a second battery, or a battery charger. And no matter where you are, if you are leading a webinar, always, always, always make sure your computer is plugged in for your presentation. That way, if the power goes out, you at least have 2 hours of battery available to you. So let's talk very briefly about camera position. You mentioned this earlier. So imagine that you are in this webinar, and this is what you see. What is wrong with this image? Go ahead and use your chat to write what's wrong with this webinar image. The window, yeah, there's too much light. There's too many pictures, Teferi says. The backlighting is too bright. Yeah, there's too much stuff. It's really crowded in the back, absolutely. The clothing, look at how busy the pattern on the shirt is. The goal of these type of meetings is to come across looking professional, calm, cool, and collected. And this is not that. This is. Notice that the camera is at eye height. So she's looking into it. And you might recognize that person. Also consider tilting your camera down a little so that it gives you a better angle. Make sure there's no light behind you. The best place is to have the light in front of you or obliquely on the sides. You can do an above your head light, but just make sure the camera isn't looking to it. Try to have a plain background, or at least just a modest background. The more things that are behind you, the more your audience is going to try to figure out what's back there. And finally, wear a solid color shirt. Video cameras do not do well with lines. They tend to wiggle them and dance them. So a solid color shirt takes away that distraction. Also consider your sound environment. Try to control it. Get to a quiet place and away from other people in your house, pets, cars. Use a headset to block out even more noise and to make your voice sound louder and clearer because there's less air between you and the microphone. Have a backup dial-in number just in case your audio goes out so you can call in by phone. And if you're going to use your phone for the audio and your computer for the visual, make sure that you mute your microphone and mute your speakers so you don't have feedback. Now you're ready to begin the session. As I mentioned earlier, close any application that you don't want people to see. Open the session at least 40 minutes early so that you can make sure everything works and solve any problems and talk with your producer. Invite participants to join about 15 minutes ahead of time. Consider playing a pre-webinar slideshow like I did so that people can learn on their own how to use the equipment. And if you are going to record this session, announce that the session is being recorded before you hit the button and after you hit the button. Once you start the session, beware that time goes much quicker when you are on the speaking end of a webinar than when you are on the listening end. So keep a clock within easy view and start on time. If you tell people 10 o'clock is the start time, start at 10 o'clock unless there's nobody on the call. It's not fair to penalize those who made the effort to come early to accommodate those who didn't. If you are on a smaller webinar and people come late, you can welcome them and tell them where we are, but don't recap everything. It's not fair to the people who were there because now they're going to wonder, well, why didn't you just say that? And it also puts you behind schedule. If you've given the slide deck ahead of time, as you turn the slides, say the page number so people can follow you quickly. And ask your producer to be your timekeeper. Most importantly, bring your patients with you. Remember that not everybody is familiar with web conferencing, not everybody is that good on computers, so you might have to be a little bit patient with them. Also, if you're in emerging markets, you might be dealing with audiences who have trouble reading, which is another good reason to use more images rather than text. Also recognize that this is a stressful time for many people. We're all working from home, rebalancing our work-life balance, where some of us are becoming homeschool teachers all of a sudden. So people are stressed, and recognize that. Most importantly, just breathe and smile. Even if you're frustrated on the inside, keep smiling and people will not know that you're annoyed. So I hope these tips have helped you to feel a little more capable and competent about presenting online. So let's go back and see if we covered everything that we talked about. And rather than me reading this, right now, I would like you to write into the chat one tip that you learned today that you're going to apply the next time you do a webinar. So go ahead and write something in the chat. Standing while presenting. Thank you, Rajiva. It definitely helps. Anybody else want to share one? Okay. Well, I hope that you have gotten some out of it. If you want to know more about this, we actually have a self-study course that is coming out in a week or two called From Live in the Classroom to Live Online. And this looks a lot more at how do you convert your classroom for the webinar environment. There's also another class coming out to help you think about, do you even need a webinar or could you use something else? And we have a longer program on instructional design. So make sure that you keep coming back to the Grow, Learn, Connect page to learn more. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to questions. You can write your questions in the chat. And Rania, were there any questions that came up that you would like me to start answering while we wait?
Yes, Karen. There is one good question from Muhammad Hayrar. And he's saying that he has been practicing IFC methodology, all with the delivering the training with gloss, ease off, and the feed formula, and incorporating some local folk wisdom in it. And he would like to have some suggestions for rationalizing and localizing the delivery methods so that training should be more interactive.
So how do you use that? Well, it's the same way. So gloss, get attention. Remember I talked about asking a question or using a trivia question or a statistic to get people's attention. Link it, just like you've heard me do throughout this. Make sure you know your transitions from one slide to the next and from one topic. Give the objectives up front, just like we said, here's what we're going to cover. And state the structure. We told you what we were going to cover in what order, and stimulate interest. Again, try to relate it to the people. So everything you've done for gloss, you can do here. For off, same thing. Repeat the main points. Ask for feedback. Just like I said, what is one thing you're going to learn? And we're going to also have an evaluation at the end. And think about the future. And we talked about the future in terms of your training and going to the Grow, Learn, Connect network, and also about how you're going to use it. And in terms of gloss ease, given an example, the activities are usually a little simpler. If you're doing a longer webinar or a multi-webinar session, you can get into some more practice type of activities. And give examples. Examples are always good. So I think all of these still really apply. I hope that answers the question. Ron, anything else?
Yeah, I would like just maybe to give an additional hint. So participants who would like also to have some hints and tips about how to adapt the content or the delivery more to the context of the training. So, for example, to adapt it more for gender related issues or trainers who are delivering in markets that are suffering from instability or conflict. So please do check the guide. I know that some of you have attended the launch of the guide, which is a very good and comprehensive tool for trainers on how to deliver best practice courses. I don't want to say a lot about it, but I'll just give you the link. I'm putting the link in the chat right now. It's on our website, the Grow, Learn, Connect guide to training. And I really, really suggest that you go and check it out, download it. And please, if you have any questions about it, send us your feedback and comments.
Thanks, Rania. Yeah, and also, if you're really interested more in how you can convert activities, in about a week or two, there's going to be that Moving Your Classroom online course that's all about converting your classroom, and it gives you a lot of good ideas about how to rationalize them too. Rania, do you got time for another question?
So there's a question from Philippines. Says, should we be considering conducting a webinar as a conversation?
Absolutely. The more you can make it a conversation, the more people will get out of it. Remember that people learn more when they actively stimulate their brains, and conversations are a great way to keep people engaged. It's a little bit tricky depending on how many people you have on your webinar. If you really want to make it conversational, keep the maximum participants small. As you start getting about over 25 to 40, it gets harder to manage that interaction. But you can also, it can be a conversation mouth to mouth, using the microphone, but you can also use those chats as a good way to have a conversation and go back and forth. So yeah, bring in your audience, absolutely.
There's a question from Shalab that says, very insightful presentation, Karen. Would like to know some good tips to start such training sessions or presentations which quickly engage the audience.
So what are some tips to quickly engage the audience at the beginning?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I think you can give them like I said, questions are always a great way. Trivia is always a great way. You can also give them a very quick activity to do. I know I've done something in a course where I was trying to get people to do things differently. And so I said, okay, right now, before we go any further, I want you to take your watch off of your wrist, put it on your other hand, and put it upside down. And now read the time. And how easy was that to do? And then we got into a discussion about that. And right away, it brings up things about, what's your comfort level and doing things as a matter of habit. But it's a really quick, easy way to bring people in. There's a lot of good advice. Again, that self-study course that we're doing has some good ideas on it. And you can look at any of the sites that I mentioned. They have some good icebreakers there too. And I just want to mention that after this webinar, we're going to be sending each of you 2 documents. One is the summary sheet that includes all of the main points, and it has those 3 links to the good sites for icebreaker activities. And we'll also be sending you a checklist to help you prepare. So look for that in your mail. And I did see a question from a number of you about, will this be recorded? Yes, it has been recorded. We will edit it just a tiny little bit, I hope, and then put that out on the GLC network so that you can access it again. So again, I encourage you to go out, bookmark the GLC network and come back to it frequently. Well, I believe that brings us right to 11:30. And so we will have to probably stop here, although I'm sure there are other questions. We will look at those questions, and if we haven't answered them, we will post some answers so that you'll have that too. So thank you so much for your participation today. And Rania, I'm going to turn it over to you for final words.
Thanks, Karen. So I would like to thank everyone for your participation. It was really excellent. And I would like to encourage you to take the survey, which I just posted in the chat, so that we get your feedback on the session. As was mentioned before, this is the first session of a number of others over the upcoming months. So it's very important for us to get your feedback and comments so that we always work on improving our services. So thank you, everyone, and please have a very good day or evening or afternoon, wherever you are.